Studio time, away with the frowns. We're gonna make super awesome sounds. Virtual Riot and Ableton, the wobs will never end. It's studio time.
Hey guys, what is going on? My name is Virtual Riot, and today's going to be all about color-based sound design, which means turning all kinds of screechy, dissonant, FME basses into something harmonic, colorful, and beautiful using a plethora of plugins and techniques that I'm going to show you today. But first, just a quick update of how my Christmas and New Year's went. And if you want to skip that, this is going to be 1 minute. So here we go. So I got to spend Christmas time in Germany with my family, which was amazing. I was there for about 2 weeks. We went to see some of Germany's classic Christmas markets in the city of Münster, and while we were there, I got to play the piano in a toy store. Both my brother and my sister each got a child in January last year, so I've got 2 nephews now, which are both about a year old. I'm really happy that I got to see my family again, and we went to see Ende Shikari, one of my favorite bands, who just happened to perform in Germany around the time we were there. We got to meet the band after the show and take pictures with them, and it was amazing. As soon as I came back, I played Countdown New Year's Eve in San Bernardino, which was an awesome show. I didn't know the stage design would be like a big UFO, which was perfect because the whole show was like themed around space, and we had this huge space intro, and a lot of my friends came up on stage. My friends and I all took a big bus to the festival and just had a great time. It was the perfect New Year's celebration, and I'm super stoked for 2023. So now I'm back in Tarzana in my home studio, and it is rainy and cold outside, but it is nice and cozy and warm inside, and I'm just very excited to make all these videos now. Alright, so let's get into the sound stuff. So we're going to talk about all the different techniques to make color-based sounds. We're going to do classic layering, then I'm going to use Synaptic MORPH, Pitchmap, and I'll show you some new Pitchmap tricks, reTune by Z-Plane, and we're going to use resonators and convolution reverbs. But we're going to look at all those different methods individually, and let's just go. I've already made a few examples here, and we'll just start with the most simple one, which is just layering chords under a bass. So right here, I've made like a little growly boy. Its contour is like happening here in this LFO. If I was going to lay that with a chord, I would like try to recreate that shape in an LFO over here. Obviously, you can just like save that shape from this one and open it in here. I just did it by hand right now. I know there are many different ways to do this easier. But together that sounds kind of nice. And that's kind of how I would use it back in the day. Or if I had like a stabby bass, I would just literally just like place the MIDI notes of the chord alongside the bass. This is actually where we can go into the first more advanced technique, where I will be mixing the sound of these chords with the bass using MORPH. So MORPH is a plugin by Synaptic, same company that did Pitchmap. And what we're going to do for this is we're going to put MORPH on the Serum over here. And MORPH works with a like sidechain input so that I can route the audio output of the Serum chords just into Serum track number 9 here, and then it already shows up as like in MORPH VSD. And I don't want my chords to have this volume automation anymore. So now in here, I have both signals like A and B, and I can blend them in or mix them together. So if I move the slider around, down here we got the bass, up here we got the chords. There's a little bit of movement going on. I made like this little vowel shape here just to go along with the bass. And then if you go in between, that sounds horrible. Why does it sound horrible? Because it is mixing A plus B or B plus A. It's a different way of like mixing the two signals together, kind of like how a vocoder does it. Like either the one signal reacts to the frequencies of the other or the other way around. So that's why this is an XY matrix. So if I now go over here, we got a much more better result. So depending on what your inputs are, you'll hear which side is the side you want to be on. Sometimes this can be cool though. So now you can try out different algorithms in here. So the 3 most useful ones are classic, interweave, and tight. So classic and tight are pretty close together. Tight is just Sounds a lot more tighter, as the name says. And then interweave kind of sounds like this. Somewhat similar, like the chords are stronger in this one. It's fun to play around with this and like find sweet spots. And for different combinations of harmonic material and like growly bass or dissonant bass, the different algorithms might sound better. In this case, the tight algorithm actually sounds really nice. And then down here, you have this little processing area with like amp sensitivity, the complexity of how one signal is shaped after the other, I guess. And somewhat of a Foreman shifter. I kind of see it like a really smart vocoder. Again, a lot of these things, as I'm explaining these faders and knobs, this is just how I interpret them and what I think they do. I haven't read the manual. Something I really got to say here. And then once you're happy with that, it's obviously also cool to go back into your two initial patches and like do something to the chord patch here, for example, by making it more detuned or more not detuned. Or changing it from saws to squares. The initial filter that I put on the chords here doesn't really do that much anymore now after we've morphed this together. But it's still cool that you can blend in the like dry chords over here if you wanted to. But I usually go and then keep processing this bass once it's morphed with the chords like a normal bass after the morph VST. So I'll like start putting my fat rack and some EQs and compression and everything on there and like start working on that. So that's one way to do it. Let's try doing the exact same thing, but just with the Ableton stock vocoder and see how different it sounds, or if it sounds like worse or better, or just let's see what other results we can get. I'm just going to cycle through the different types in here one more time. These down here, I think are legacy algorithms, if I'm not mistaken. Usually classic or tight are my favorites, but sometimes interweave is the move. Again, really just depends on what kind of sound you're looking for. But okay, let's try the Ableton Vocoder. Got the Ableton Vocoder in here right now. It's just using the carrier as the modulator. So the bass is both inputs. It's just creating this like really like bubbly effect, and we can use this as some saturation. I like doing that sometimes. But let's use an external input, and the audio input is going to be channel 10, which is where our chords are. So now we got. That's cool too, but it does sound different than the MORPH plugin. And in terms of clarity and detail, sometimes I think I do like the MORPH plugin more, but I still use the Ableton Vocoder a lot for other purposes. But for a purpose like this, I would usually go to the MORPH plugin, I have to admit. Quick side note here, there are also other ways to blend in something harmonic with the bass that like goes along with its volume or its frequencies with some other plugins. And I haven't really used this in a track, but it is a cool method that I do want to try out eventually here and there. So we're going to take our initial bass. Fat Rack is on there, doesn't matter. And I'm going to use Texture by Devious Machines. So this is basically erosion on steroids. Erosion is an Ableton stock plugin. So what this does is it mixes in a sample, in this case right now, white noise, with an attack, hold, and decay envelope, depending on the input volume of whatever comes in. So if I turn this gate all the way up, and we just listen to what it adds, it just adds like really crackly white noise, and it's crackly because the attack and decay times are so short down here. So it almost sounds like it's adding distortion. So that's cool to begin with. But what we can do here is we can import our own sample into this plugin. So I can take a like very harmonic and beautiful pad. Let's take something from my old Atmosphere sample pack. Yeah, why not that one? All right, drop that in here. and I'm going to solo just the wet output of the plugin. So obviously this is now crackling just like it did before with the noise, and I don't want that, so I'm just going to make it smoother with more attack and decay time. And if I wanted to go along a little more with that wow, wee, wow, wow rhythm, I can make this automation, like the volume of this, go along with only a certain frequency range of the input. So maybe just the mid-range. Soften it a little bit more. And now turn up the gain or even the mix knob. So now my pad is coming in whenever the bass is playing. And if I feel like there's too much low end on this pad, I can use the filter in here right away and just say, oh, I just want to add the top end of the sample I selected. Also, right now, it's just going to play through the sample in the background the entire time, and it'll just turn up the volume whenever the bass is playing, which works here because the sample that I loaded in is just like a continuous pad that doesn't really change the entire time, but you can change it to just like trigger whenever there is an input volume threshold met. So that can be helpful if your input material isn't as consistent as this sample. There are also a lot of cool other modes in here, like random positioning and granular, but we could talk about this for ages. But yeah, this is another method of doing this. All right, next up are the amazing one-trick ponies, the harmonizer plugins, Pitchmap, and reTune. So we're going to start with reTune by Zplane, and I'll use a different bass, but I'll also use this bass we've had so far also as a reference. So I'm just going to move the reTune that I've made over to the bass we had here, the little growl. So reTune looks like this. It remaps your harmonics from this scale to whatever other scale you want. So if all these squares go diagonally, it's just going to stay exactly the same. But right now I have tuned it to be like a C, D sharp, E, like a minor chord with the 7th. You can transpose the whole thing, obviously. And then there are some options here, obviously, how strong you want this effect to be. What I like about this one is that there's like this transient knob here. The input material isn't very transient heavy, but it's still making it a little more crispy. And also by the strength of how bright these squares are glowing, you kind of see which harmonics or which notes are being triggered the most. So I can immediately change, like I can see, oh, this is the na, na. So if I want this to be na or na, I can just move this up. And since this bass is an F, the sub is an F, so obviously right now the sub will also be moved from an F to a G sharp or a C. So this way you can just like make sure your sub stays where you want it to be, unless you want to do the whole thing of doing this with parallel processing and keeping your sub separate and just applying this effect to like the mids and everything else. But what I did up here is I used a different Serum patch, which is a cool little FME sound that just does this thing. And we can change the pitch of the FM operator here with this macro. And there's basically the same reTune preset on this. So with reTune, it sounds like this. Just for fun, I've added some drums here, so we can actually hear what this would sound like in context, quote unquote. If we change the FM pitch, like the frequency where the screechiness of this FM sound is going to hit, this is obviously going to trigger different harmonics in reTune that it's going to repitch it to, so you can sort of adjust the melody that way. So that's kind of fun. And this sound is a lot more percussive. So here, this transient knob in reTune does a little bit more. So without it, kind of weak. A lot more punchy. And then if you turn the pitch correct down a bit, or the sensitivity down, then it's not as strong anymore. Still does a little bit, so it's kind of like a dry wet. There's a dry wet down here, like a full dry wet, but you get what I mean. That's what it sounded like before. And you can also easily shift your scale here to something else. So if you've made this and you're in F minor, but now your song is actually in D sharp minor, you just click this here and now you are in D sharp minor. So now I hear you say, this sounds a lot like the same thing that Pitchmap does, which is true. So let's compare this to Pitchmap with like the exact same sound and just see the difference. Actually, hear the difference. Let's duplicate this track, and instead of reTune, we're going to use Pitchmap and hope that Ableton doesn't crash while I open it. We are in luck. Okay, so we have been in, let's just stay in D sharp minor. Why not? I'm going to select the pentatonic minor just for now, and sounds kind of similar. Let's see, are we... So that's reTune, and that's Pitchmap. I think Pitchmap is heavier on the CPU, especially if you turn up this purify knob, as you will be able to hear now if I turn it all the way up. My CPU starts to fry, but Pitchmap has a lot of cool other options that give you a little more versatility. First of all, you can send MIDI into it to select the notes it's supposed to retune your input into. But there are a lot more cool features that I have recently figured out that I didn't even know were a thing here. So let's start with the knobs down here. So purify obviously is kind of like almost like a dry wet, like the strength. Feel kind of is like a detune. It's like very straightforward. This feels a little wider and detuned. On this sound, the difference isn't that extreme. And then electrify, I think, changes the higher harmonics to be more odd than even. Again, makes it more like electric and glossy, I guess. But overall, like you can dial it in here how like more metallic or natural you want it to feel. So a bunch of cool options here. Then, though, there's a whole nother thing here that is really cool, which is, so in this window, you see all those notes, all those harmonics that are being targeted and being repitched. So what you can do is, I'm just going to turn these down and purify a little bit up so we hear exactly what's going on. Once I hold this one with my mouse, I can hear exactly which one this is. It's the one that goes na 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 na, or an octave up. So you can move those around. And as you can see, this happens for all octaves at once, unless down here I change from repeat to visible or custom. So now I can just do it for just this octave. And there's a whole nother cool thing here, which is amazing. That is that, let's say that is too high for me and like too aggressive. So you can double click these points and they turn into different shapes and they do something else. So what it does is now it goes down an octave and now it goes up an octave. The effect will be more extreme if I re-enable that what I'm doing here is happening to all octaves. So I'll select repeat over here and I'll do it again. I've done it to all the notes. So this is a cool way to have more control over how each individual harmonic is going to be retuned to what note, and if it's going to sound too high or too low, you can do something about it here by adjusting it individually for every note. It's like a lot of micromanagement, but I do like this level of intricacy here. So that's definitely a win on Pitchmap side here. Not saying one plugin is better than the other. Always matters what you're going to use it for. But I'm sorry, I have to go on a tangent on Pitchmap for a little bit because I tried out some things and found out something cool. So I made a Serum patch that is just the saw wave with a sync warp on it. That's all it does. And it has 3 voices and it can detune. So first of all, if we put that through Pitchmap, that already sounds fun. So this Pitchmap is set to like a pentatonic F scale. And also what I've done over here is I have used the exclude mode to have it not pitch map all the low frequencies. So if I use a sub here, if I use the extra sub sine wave here, it's not going to be affected by Pitchmap, which is kind of nice. So you can kind of save yourself the parallel processing here if you want to. But the main thing I wanted to talk about here is the glide knob here. So usually, as you can hear, if I play different notes, you will hear different harmonics or different notes being repitched pretty much instantaneously. And if I turn the glide knob up, it starts to slide on like really fast and yoinky and like dubstep basses. This usually sounds rather messy very quickly, but on sustained things, it can sound really interesting. Okay, so at this point, because I want to demonstrate this better, I am going to turn up my buffer size. So I'll have a little more latency, but my CPU won't die and we won't have audio dropouts. There we go. So that sounds interesting. I'm just bringing in the sub here, which is not being retuned because I excluded it down here. I just thought that sounded like really interesting. And if I turn the glide down all the way, it sounds different. It doesn't have that much motion anymore. It's actually really sick, especially with the long glide time, because so you are without Pitchmap, so you're changing these like harmonics here, these things going up and down, and Pitchmap is trying to map these to the scale that you've selected. But since you're moving these around so fast and the glide is so long, it's taking its time to shift them into the right place. So it's this really slow sort of coming together of a chord that happens every time you move this knob here by changing the input harmonics. I don't know, maybe it sounds awful, but I kind of like the sound, and I think this is something really cool to work with for maybe a bass, maybe just some background chords, maybe a build-up, maybe some dramatic intro, who knows? another very common color-based technique is using a convolution reverb, which I think Chime has also made some videos about. And luckily, Ableton now has its own convolution reverb called Hybrid Reverb, but there are plugins out there that do the same thing. I can recommend Convolver by Audio Thing. This is a reverb that you load your own sample into. By default, I have the sample here. Without the reverb, it sounds like this. Just some like yoinky bass one shot. So the reverb makes it sound like this, kind of as if it's in a small room. But we can put something in here, like a clap or something that sounds like a will create like an echo space, and then the convolution reverb algorithm makes it into a reverb sound. I'm not going to explain all the details here, but what I did here is I made my own little convolution reverb sample library, which is also going to be available for Patreons. And basically all these one-shots that you can drag into this or into any convolution reverb of your choosing. And what happens is, let's say we take this sort of like minor 7th chord and put it in here. So now this machine gun bass has this beautiful, colorful tail, and we can adjust its length, and we can EQ that tail. So now we're just listening to the wet signal. And changing the reverb size, kind of the reverb length here, will change the pitch of the sample, which is interesting. So that'll change the pitch of our chord now. So you might want to like figure out what key you're in, or load a chord that is in the key of the song that you are making. Sadly, the size parameter cannot be automated, and I wish there was something where there was pitch tracking for it, where like this was tracking along with the note you were playing so that it would always match the key that you're playing. There are ways to do that, but that is still very CPU intense. But that's one way to do it. It's also really fun to put other things than just like bass sounds into this, like drums or something. It basically just adds like a texture of whatever you put into here to your initial sound. It's interesting if there's something with some motion going on or some melody. Like let's pick something like maybe that one. And then that little da will obviously go faster if I change the size knob down here. Or really slow. That's kind of cool. I actually really like that. Another thing is, in changing the pitch of the input sound now will also create different results. So let's keep the pitch of the sample in the convolution reverb at what it is right now. And change the pitch of our input yoink, which by itself sounds like this. And move this pitch around. So playing your input sample at different pitches will trigger different frequencies to respond in the convolution reverb. Even I don't know how it fully works in detail, but this is as best as I can explain. Yeah, why not? Maybe a little shorter. And then now we can process things as usual after all of this. The decay is still really long, so maybe shorten that even more. Or change the size. But now we're obviously in a different key because that has changed the pitch of that whole chord. But that's fun. You also have some other cool parameters here, like the stereo width of your convolution reverb. If you want it to be mono or really wide. And obviously nothing is stopping you from using this in parallel processing as well. So we could just hit Command G, group this, and make another empty chain here. Turn this to 100% dry wet. So now we got our dry signal here and our colorful signal over here. And if I feel like, that's maybe too long or too reverby, has too much of a tail, I could use some reduced ambience or maybe a auto filter or auto pan. Or if it's not wide enough, I could add some chorus or like EQ this, because it is quite spiky, somewhere around here. And now mix them both together again. Obviously now this needs an additional sub below it, but this is usually how my sound design process would be going. Let's try one more thing just for fun, where I am making this convolution reverb rather long. So this tail is now ringing out quite for a while, but I'll make it rhythmical by adding an auto pan at a fixed speed. So let's see what that sounds like on like 16th notes. That can be fun too. Maybe 8th notes. Yeah, why not? Obviously, this isn't going along with the rhythm of what I made here right now. So maybe if we adjust that a little bit and just go for something more simple. That kind of works. Changes in the auto pan to quarter notes is kind of fun. That sounds kind of cool. Yay, new idea for a song. Maybe I'll start something with this. As always, I will export this and you will get the results for download as samples on the Patreon. So just listening to the wet signal of this convolution reverb here has kind of sparked an idea. I've added this frequency shifter that like is automated to like go up and down here a little bit, and I added this sub. And with the drums, that's kind of fun. So I just want to go on a tangent here and make this sub a little more interesting as the layer below this. Just so you can like see my workflow with this kind of stuff. I don't know if it's going to be any good, but we will just go for it. So maybe let's make something FM-y here. Sub goes to direct out. And I kind of want some sort of womp here to follow that rhythm of the initial dum, byada, byada, byam. Let's listen to the sub itself. Kind of simple, but sort of fun. Some noise, some distortion. That's kind of fun. Add a little fat rack, which is just like right now, just some 50% OTT, some reduced ambience, multiband compression, saturation knob, and another 50% OTT or 20%. That's kind of fun. So maybe for my taste, this sub layer thing would need a little bit of EQing. Let's just have a look at it. So our convolution reverb melodic layer thing is pretty dominant in this region, like 500 to 1K. That's where like most of the melodic like fundamentals sit. So maybe I'll cut that in the sub so that there's room for it. Yeah, that's kind of fun. The snare doesn't really fit this vibe now, but that's fun. Yeah, okay. On to the next thing. We shall continue with the resonator technique. I'm just going to use the sub that we made earlier. I moved it to the key of F and kept the drums. Right now it sounds like this. Some I'm gonna make it a little more percussive, and I'm gonna increase the tune of our FM modulator. So we get something like this. And I'm just gonna use the Ableton stock resonator, but there is also a really cool plugin called reZonator with a Z that does the same thing with a few more extra features actually, which is pretty nice. But for now, we're just gonna use this. So this basically, I'm just gonna turn all these voices off, just resonate like. Think of it as like a comp filter that is tuned to a note. And then the decay is kind of the resonance, like how long it's gonna ring out. And the color is just like a soft blanket of a low pass that'll make the high frequencies ring out faster than the low frequencies. So I'm just gonna turn the dry and wet all the way up. So you can tune this even really low to get some sort of bassy sound. Now it's almost like a tonal delay, like a really short delay, because that's like kind of what comp filter does as well. In total, you have like 5 voices of this, so you can tune them all to a chord, for example. So by default, I have tuned these to be like a F. So this is at F, then this is a 5th, this is a 9th, minor 3rd at an octave up, and a 7th. You can adjust like the volume and the pan for each of them individually. But right now, altogether, they just create this chord. And then if you change the pitch of the root here, you move the whole chord around. But since our bass is at F, I will keep this at F as well. And then just dial the dry and wet and the gain of it in so that it kind of, maybe the decay a little shorter. Kind of similar in sound to the Convolution Reverb, but not quite. You're kind of stuck here with this comp filtery sound. And the mode A and B here really just switches between a positive and a negative comp filter. So between even and odd harmonics, saw wave sound, or square wave sound, as you can hear if I do this. Sounds like a square wave, or mode A, like a saw wave. But this can be cool too sometimes. Has been sort of overused though, I think, here and there. But on other things like vocals or drums, this can sometimes be really cool. Like I'm just for fun gonna throw this on the drums. Okay, that doesn't sound cool. Let me just grab a whole drum loop and show you what I mean. Let's take this whole loop from the Spicy Rhythm Drums Volume 2 pack, and I'm just going to drag the resonator on there. So that's kind of cool. And again, with something like this, I feel like parallel processing is quite attractive. Dry and wet to 100%, second chain with the dry signal. The wet signal, maybe remove some of the low end, and then maybe add some like delay and reverb or something. That's kind of nice. Maybe even an octave up. Oh, this is a G now, but why not? But obviously, the big problem here is you are stuck to this chord and you can automate all these by hand, but that's not cool. There's a Max for Live device that let you send MIDI to this, but reZonator, that plugin, actually does that for you. So let's load up reZonator. So here we have even 6 of these. You can kind of do the same thing where we have like build a chord. Let's build. Let's make like something like this, and maybe. And then the root one again shifts it around. We can switch between even and odd harmonics. got our decay time, our color, and even a filter. So I think this is a lot more versatile to put on basses, and it has the cool feature that you can send MIDI into it. So you can actually like play chords and melodies over something percussive, for example, which is really cool. And I love doing that. And I'm definitely going to use that in a future song. One more thing, though, on the topic of resonators before we move on. Ableton has introduced in the new version this new effect called Spectral Resonator, which sounds like this. So I made the bass sound here. That by itself sounds like this. And if you turn it on, it just gives you this. Again, kind of like a tunable comb filter, but since it's spectral, it's turning the input into like lots of sine waves. 256 to be exact, and you can even change the amount here. If you turn it to 1, it's literally just a sine wave, and you can dampen the high and the lows. So this is great for like physical modeling stuff. It's kind of a little bit similar to Corpus when you set it on tube and pipe mode. So I'm just going to set Corpus on pipe mode. Kind of similar to that. And the fun thing here is, so you can also obviously change this between, these are all even harmonics or with this stretch thing, odd harmonics. It's kind of annoying that it's limited to this amount of harmonics, because in this spectrum here you can see how it's like cut off up here. There's a little more here because there's some distortion happening here. But if you stretch it, and then it stretches all the even harmonics, which is like every harmonic, and odd harmonics are just every other. It stretches them like up. So then you have a little more top end, as you can see. For that squarey sound, but that's cool. The shift thing here, I think, shifts the input. Kind of reminds me of the Foreman knob on the Ableton Vocoder, but you can feed this thing MIDI as well. So I've made a little MIDI track down here. So now I'm saying here mode instead of internal. I want MIDI input from MIDI channel 11. And probably should turn that on. Not a monophonic, but polyphonic, and voices up to 16. So like I wrote these chords here. I added a bass note that I'm just going to turn on for now, just so we can hear. So this effect is at 100% wet right now. It does sound very metallic and mono. So it has a unison mode, so you can get up to 8 voices and detune them. That is nice. It has a couple different algorithms here where it like uses a chorus with pitch mod and modulation rate. Wanderer, I don't really know. It's more like ensemble, I guess. And a similar. Granular is kind of fun. Can get really glossy, kind of like bad MP3 quality. And this gets interesting with long decay times. And then lower amount of harmonics. Like this can be a cool layer if you then add delays and reverbs and play that parallel to whatever the source signal was. So going back to the original sound with all the harmonics, and then dry wetting that in with the original. And I'm just going to take this low note out of here so that it's just giving us this. And then the transposition knob now just transposes your MIDI input. So if I want all of this an octave lower, and now wider with my unison. So yeah, that's kind of cool. Another resonator plugin, basically, that you can put MIDI into. I've used this on drums as well here and there. You can get some pretty interesting results with this, especially now if we mixed with this bass, we use this shift knob. To change the kind of like almost the form and the timbre of the chords, or we could turn them into odd harmonics. Good times. And now for the absolute purists, and because I gotta mention it, you can obviously draw your own resonator in an equalizer by just making lots of tiny little peaks that are like harmonically related. Luckily, FabFilter Pro Q3 gives you this keyboard at the bottom where you can like latch all these peaks that you make onto the exact frequency of a note. So here I've made a little chord that turns this growl into this. Doesn't really turn it into this, it just accentuates the harmonics or the frequencies that are happening right here. Obviously, I'm trying to roll off the top end here. And as you can hear, this low end is ringing out for quite a while. So this is where linear phase EQing actually shows what it does. You can hear this kind of tail, right? So if I change the mode of this equalizer from 0 latency to linear phase, a lot more tight. And if I change it to maximum, we even get some kind of reverse sweep into it. But we also get a lot of latency. This is actually quite interesting. A nice thing here is you can select all of these and just shift them around like an octave up. If you wanted to, or you can adjust their gain altogether, or their Q. And there are some EQs that let you do something like this with MIDI input as well. So you're playing your own resonator again in just an EQ form. So it's kind of like many different tools doing the same thing in somewhat similar ways. This is just another way. Sometimes I'm using this actually in my songs to just like harmonize a certain part of a pad or a certain sound, like not even just for basses. Like right here, for example, I have a drum loop, and if I put it on that, that does sound kind of fun. Let's try all the different modes here. The 0 latency version with that like decay that we get because of the phasing is kind of nice here. The decay will be less if the Q isn't that strong. Oh yeah, this is, don't worry about this. This is reacting dynamically because I accidentally did that. Actually, if I can make these all react dynamically, that'd be even cooler. I totally forgot that Pro Q3 has this feature now. Depending on the input volume of this area, it'll just like turn the gain of that EQ point, or whatever it's supposed to do, up. So now our Selfmade Resonator is a lot more reactive to the input material. This one's out of the key. I just need you by yourself. That's fun. Let me adjust a few things. Like these high ones up here should be a little quieter. No, get out of the way. Just want to roll off the top end here. That's kind of cool. I wonder how many points we can add before the plugin says, no more. But I like how that snare at the end here hits one of those resonances, for example. So yeah, that's a very tedious way to do it yourself. And just for comparison, in linear phase mode, And now just for comparison, a Pitchmap. Different flavor, but kind of the same results. I tried to do something similar here too, but also interesting if we mix that FabFilter Selfmade Resonator input with Pitchmap. It's getting very artifacty now because of so much processing. Like all the top end is just a mess now. But yeah, building your own resonators in equalizers can be fun, and it's also a fun tool to turn anything that isn't harmonic at all into something harmonic. Okay, quick little tangent here about the Resonator plugin that I actually haven't used that much yet. So I have this drum loop over here from the Spicy Rhythm Drums pack. And I'm parallel processing it by running it dry on one chain, and then the other chain goes fully through Resonator, triggered by MIDI. And then the fully wet output gets a chorus, a little bit of stereo widening. This is a rack I'll explain later and also give to my Patreons. And then a little bit of delay and reverb, another rack for the Patreons. So now I can like play chords on this drum loop, and the chords are getting like delayed and reverb and really wide. And it sounds really nice, and I just really enjoy jamming to this. There's this amazing detail that I noticed that is, so as you can see, if I'm pressing a note on my keyboard here, these resonators turn on and there's a limit of 6. And if I press more than 6, the next one is going to replace the first one. But also the gain of each note of the resonator is automatically linked to the velocity of how hard I hit the key. So let me just show you. So I can play this really soft, and then if I hit this note really hard, it'd be louder than all the others. I just really love this because I like when in the process of making a song, you can make, like, let's say you've made the drums and then you want to make the chords. And if you can make the chords out of the drums, then they are already intertwined and like belong to each other, and there's a connection, and it kind of like gives it more meaning. I don't know, sounds a little cheesy. But I just like working like that, like turning one thing into another and building upon itself. It kind of takes away the need of like, oh, I need to make a whole new synth sound. No, I can just like, I have drums, now I need chords. I can make chords out of the drums. And this is amazing. Great plugin. I don't know how much it is, $25? Amazing. Yeah, $25. Damn it. Super sick. Okay, one more thing just for comparison. Let's just try out what this bass would sound like if these chords weren't triggering that Spectral resonator, but were triggering the chords like the MIDI in Pitchmap, or were saw chords in MORPH, just so we have like all the variations. So I'm just going to group this at this point, and I will create a chain and hope that my laptop doesn't die, and we shall see it. I will draw in the Pitchmap. Yay! It didn't die! Okay, so live MIDI map, MIDI coming from here. So MIDI output to 10 Serum. Pitchmap in, and then I will solo this chain so we can see it happening here. And so interesting here is also, once you do this, these buttons up here still matter. So I am just sending in these notes, but this here in Pitchmap is set on repeat. So it's going to repeat all these notes all over all octaves. So if I hit custom, it's really just going to be the MIDI that I send it. So now if I take this and pitch it down, so that's cool. Also changes that you yourself apply here in terms of, I want this to be an octave down or something. I think still, yeah, they still stick around if you turn on MIDI input. And then last but not least, I wanted to try MORPH and have these chords be just saw chords that are being morphed together with the bass. I'm just going to keep it straight like this for now and see what it sounds like. So send the audio of this to Serum 10 MORPH VST, already selected, because that's the only thing here that can receive audio. Cool. On intro weave, maybe? I did like the classic. Okay, that's kind of cool. And now let's detune this with lots of voices, like the chorus that we're feeding in. All right, now we have all three of them right next to each other, and they're all fed with the same MIDI chords. If we were a crazy person, we could also have different MIDI chords or melodies going into different routings of these. That's the Spectral Resonator. That's our Pitchmap. And that's our MORPH. Let's just listen to them all together. Why not? Bit of a mess, but it's just interesting to hear them side by side. Yeah, so these are many methods of harmonizing bass sounds, and not just bass sounds. You can literally take anything that is atonal and give a tonality this way, make it harmonic, make it like a chord or a melody or a note. The possibilities are endless, and I love where everything is going with this whole color-based trend right now. Some people say like the resonator sound is a little like overplayed, but I think there is still so much potential in this. So many ways to use this in ways where nobody's ever going to hear that this one-trick pony kind of sound, and you just got to get creative with it. All right, one more thing on the topic of putting comp filters on stuff to like superimpose tonality or a melody onto something. So here I have a Serum that is just playing a saw wave, like could be anything, but just for demonstration reasons, we're just going to use a saw wave. Just plays these 4 notes. And then I'm running it through a SerumFX where that saw wave is coming in, and then there is a comp filter here that has key tracking enabled, and I'm playing the comp filter with the keyboard over here. So as soon as I hit a note, that note on the comp filter being like superimposed onto the bass note that the saw wave is playing. And the fun thing is that I can even play multiple notes. The only weird thing is that the volume gets louder with every note I play, but a compressor at the end could fix this. But this sounds really fun, actually. So, of course, you could even do this to not just a saw wave, but like a bass that is coming in. I have no idea what that would sound like right now, but I'm just going to try it out and we'll see where that goes. Let's find something that is like not too extreme, but that we can work with. Let's see, what do we have here? Nah, that's already melodic. Just for demonstrational purposes, why not? So I'm going to slow it down and just try this out. See what it sounds like. That does sound somewhat cool. If you want this effect to be stronger, obviously you can increase the resonance on that filter, and then you have... It's got to be careful. Oh, so that got very metallic. So I'm actually not just using the regular positive comp filter here. I'm using it with an applied low pass that like rolls off the top. With that, we can make it a little softer. So I'm just going to play the same chord again. So that sounds a lot better already. So now we could play something along to this chord progression. This obviously doesn't sound like amazing, but you get the idea. Like, just try this out with whatever input, with whatever bass patch from Serum, and then just route it this way. If you are confused about the routing, so I got the Serum with the original bass right here, and then behind it a SerumFX, where you got to turn on the noise, and it has to be on audio in, turn on the filter, turn on key tracking, make sure that like the noise here goes through filter, because the noise is that audio input, that initial Serum that's coming through, and then there's a second MIDI track that sends MIDI to the SerumFX that's on this channel. And then you got to write your MIDI over here and don't accidentally play both together. Though you could, I guess, but yeah, that's not what we're going for here. All right, and last but not least, because this is really getting into this kind of physical modeling mechanic that I've been using here and there, and also reminds me a lot of how I've been making the sounds for my song Dream Logic. I wanted to show you guys one more method with MORPH, where one input is just sustained chords, and the other input is just like a noisy exciter, kind of like how physical modeling works, where you have a resonator and an exciter, like just like a white noise sound, and then the resonator kind of creates the chords and the melodic part and all the harmonics and the overtones. So here I have two Serums. One of them is literally just doing this. Actually, I'm going to turn off all the effects. It could even just be just like a lasery zap with some noise on it, and that's it in a rhythm. And I put a vocoder on it and OTT just to make it a little more glossy. And then I like shaped it just to sound a little cooler like this. And then the other Serum is playing chords that just sound like this by themselves. So what's happening here is we got just supersaws by themselves. They just sound like this. And then I have, just like before, with a comp filter that superimposes a melody on top, I have made a little automation here that you can see that does this little thing. So now with their powers combined, we get something like this. So this is on tight mode right now. And I am also adding a vocoder after the whole morphing has happened. And now I'm gonna edit this curve a bit. So again, trying out different algorithms here, like the classic interweave tight. It's always fun to see which one sounds the best for this opportunity. That's kind of cool. I've also added a corpus at the end here just for fun on tube. So on auto harmonics, just static, slightly mixed in at like. Kind of like at a fixed pitch, but you can even automate the tune here again or send MIDI to it to kind of do the same thing with it that I did earlier with that comp filter in Serum where I played it via MIDI. You can kind of do the same thing here. We can play this resonator via MIDI. All right, okay, back again with the sock. I promise by the next episode I'll find the thing that's actually supposed to go here. Well, that comprises most of the techniques that I use to make color-bassy sounds. I know we didn't make a full tune right now, and I hope that you can all use these techniques to make something cool out of this. Also, all the sounds that I've made today in this session will be available for my Patreons. The link is in the description. I'm also going to give you the convolution samples for convolution reverbs that I've made, like those chord stabs that I put into Ableton's hybrid reverb, or that you can put into whatever convolution reverb you have that accepts sample imports. So the idea moving forward here is that I find a replacement for the sock, and that in the future, for future videos, just like this one, whatever I make in the session, all Serum presets and sounds and samples, and maybe sometimes even the entire project file, will be available to you if you subscribe to my Patreon, and the link will be in the description. Alright, so also, I know that my Patreon isn't fully set up yet, and people have been waiting for it, and I just want to get it started, and it's gonna grow over time, and I'm gonna maintain it, but I can tell you for now that from this episode, if you start subscribing now, you're gonna get all this stuff that we made in this episode, which are all these bass sounds and bass loops. And also the Serum preset files of the basses that we made, plus you're gonna get this whole folder of the Convolution Reverb samples that I made. That you can put into whatever Convolution Reverb you have, or if you have Ableton, you can put them into Hybrid Reverb. Because I've never had a Patreon before, I just want to be really careful with this and just tell you what you're gonna get right now, and I want to like give away as much as I can, and I just want to make sure that you know what you're gonna get, and I tell you what you get and what you don't get. Like, you don't get this sock, for example. I'm very sorry. I accidentally cut the last video short where I was showing some songs I made on this thing. So first of all, I forgot to show you some. I remade a Skrillex song. That's not it. Let's see if you can guess what this is. So just to hype up the Patreon thing a little bit, if I mean, I don't know, I've never had a Patreon before, so we'll see how this goes. So once I have 1,000 Patreons, I'll pick one of them at random and sign this thing and send it to them. You can tell I'm really trying to sell this thing. Oh, and PS, if you've been worried about me or my mental health, and if I look tired to you or exhausted, don't worry. I know in my last video I talked about how like the last 8 years have been like just touring non-stop. And that's one of the reasons why I took a month off in November this year. I just want you all to know that I am taking care of myself, getting enough sleep, and feeling kind of like this Pikachu.